Begin the evening with our introduction to our local hero for peace, Mary Taylor. She is one of the founding members of the Black Lives Matter Committee of the African American and Friends Club in Rossmoor. And we became aware of her work through members of our board, who are actually members or community members in Rossmoor. And what was most remarkable to me when I first heard about it was first one, like how has no one else been doing this before? Like why is Mary seemingly doing this on her own? And how can we support her in what she's doing? And when I first heard about the work Mary was doing, it came right after the tragic killing of George Floyd last spring. The country was in a very tumultuous time. And I think a lot of people were feeling feelings of anger, confusion, and people were just fed up with what they saw as an extremely racist and violent system. And what I really appreciated about the work Mary had done in Rossmoor was that not only she organized rallies and raised awareness around police brutality, but she organized educational events and sessions for community members to come, share their experiences about racism, and furthermore, learn more about their own prejudices and how we can make a better difference. So Mary comes from a long line, or basically is a logical next step in the Peace Center's kind of legacy. She really steps into the shoes that the Peace Center is trying to fill here. And we really appreciate Mary for joining us here today. So it's an honor to welcome up Mary to give her an address, but please join me in welcoming Mary Taylor.
Okay. Thank you so very much. I'd like to sincerely, first of all, thank the Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center for this honor, and also giving me an opportunity in almost over a year to put on makeup and to get dressed above the waist. So thank you so much. When Andrew first emailed me, it really caught me off guard because I just felt I was doing what I was being called to do at that particular time and what needed to be done. And so I believe nothing of significance is ever accomplished alone. So I'd like to recognize those that have assisted or supported the work for which I am being recognized today. My tribe, my family, and my friends. First, my family, who I love so very, very much. They're my staunchest supporters, don't mess with me, and whose love gives me life. I just love them. Secondly, all my friends at Rossmoor and those that are working here for equality as well. All my wellness journey friends, you know who you are. My Danville church family, and all my dear friends from other walks of life. I'd like to especially recognize Shirley Rodriguez and Denise Canario, because they have been there every step of the way in this work. So thank you for all of your love and support, because as Clarence, the angel from my favorite Christmas movie, my kids are rolling their eyes, says to George Bailey, no one is a failure who has friends. So thank you all so much. What I'd like to do is share some thoughts on possibilities in conjunction with Black Lives Matter. The Black Lives Matter movement is really about recognizing the humanity of Black people and the love of Black lives. Arnold Toynbee, a British historian, wrote, "Love is the ultimate force that makes for the saving choice of life and good against the damning choice of death and evil." And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "We can no longer afford to worship the God of hate and bow before the altar of retaliation." Because he said history is cluttered with the wreckage of nations and individuals that pursue this self-defeating path of hate. So let us just imagine the possibility of the reality of Black Lives Matter. Because when Black lives matter, then all lives will matter. If Black lives had mattered when there was a proliferation of crack cocaine and drugs in the Black community, perhaps we would not have had the opioid crisis years later in this country. If Black lives had mattered when guns were a crisis in the Black community in schools, imagine the possibility that there would not have been a Columbine or a Miami Post nightclub shooting. Perhaps if Black healthcare and Black respiratory problems caused by the location of polluting businesses near poor communities and Black breathing mattered, perhaps this respiratory COVID pandemic would have been experienced differently by all of us. And the possibility that if Black Lives Matter, the media would not have focused on economic anxiety and would have insisted focused and acknowledged the legacy of racism and white supremacy that is alive and well in our country, might the possibility exist that we would be at a different place in race relations. Professor Liliana Mason, in her book, Uncivil Agreements, How Politics Became Our Identity, describes the political desire to be better and to establish wins over others, to win at all costs, and the willingness to even pay a cost to maintain the superior status. So what now do you think is the possibility of making progress so that when Black lives matter, all lives matter? I wonder what you're thinking. Rabbi Joachim Prince spoke at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963, immediately before Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. The rabbi said, we cannot be a nation of onlookers. We have to work together, and it's not enough to hope. So what is it that you hope might change? It's not enough to hope. We know we have to do something, and really that's where it starts, just doing something. Whatever it is you can do at this moment, wherever you are. What are the policies or the things that are happening that you feel are not right? You can make your voice heard, whether it's speaking up, holding a sign, signing a petition, writing letters, calling your representatives, making financial donations, protesting, just being heard. As the late and amazing John Lewis said, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get into trouble. What kind of trouble? Good trouble, necessary trouble. So a few years ago, as Andrew shared, we started the Black Lives Matter Committee at Rossmoor under the African American and Friends Club. And at the beginning, we held quarterly events to educate and create awareness. And then, as we all know, on May 25th in Minneapolis, changed everything. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds of George Floyd's killing by a policeman who was accustomed to the police union's contract of immunity seemed to bring everything to a deafening crescendo. I am convinced that spiritual support was mobilized when I was able to pull together the first Zoom program, Conversations on Systemic Racism, within a few days of inception, to explore the existence of policies where Black lives had not mattered, and to discuss the possibilities of making the changes where Black lives do matter. With the help of friends and new friends, and even family on their expertise on systemic racism, and especially, as Andrew noted, the very brave Rossmoor Black residents who shared personal, painful, horrific, and humiliating experiences of everyday life of Black people in this country. This series was launched. There would be 6 more conversations on systemic racism held on the subject of police bias on Blackness and mental health biases, US housing policies that continue to this day to disenfranchise, the differences in healthcare responses, the injustice of the criminal justice system, and how to build safe communities was shared by our partner at the Ella Baker Center, and the continuing challenge of employment discrimination, and yes, an answer to the question, why can't Black people just, were presented and discussed. So what do you think the possibilities of equality in these areas might look like? I read that in President Biden's plan to address racial inequality. The resulting change would bring trillions in US GNP. Remember, when Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. All lives are impacted. The Black Lives Matter movement began after the police killing of a teenager, Michael Brown, in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. It was interesting when I was researching that they didn't describe him as a teenager. That's another issue with Black policing. The past summer, we held a Say Their Name campaign vigil in Rossmoor, where we recognized over 100 Black and brown unarmed people that had been killed by the police. This list also, unfortunately, included Miles Hall, a young African-American man with a history of mental illness, killed by the Walnut Creek City Police when responding to the family's 911 call. Just imagine the possibilities of providing community resources that are best able to handle issues such as mental health and domestic disturbances, decreasing incidents that result in both Black and white deaths. Because when Black lives matter, all lives will matter. The Black Lives Matter movement is not about Black privilege, but about Black survival. It is about having honest conversations about the need for change. Change in policing of Black people that result in criminal charges, totally at the discretion of the police and the prosecutors, and convictions and imprisonment, which are harsher on Black citizens. Changes in the bail system, the cash bail system, which exists in only 2 countries of the world, one being the US. It assesses a penalty even before someone is convicted. And when they're found not guilty, does nothing to repair the financial burden or loss of employment or housing or broken families that are a result of unfair and perhaps biased charges. And yes, racial profiling is happening today locally. So I'm so grateful for the new administration, DOJ's focus on transformation to a system that offers liberty and justice for all. It's about us developing and exhibiting the faith that how goes one, goes all. Not about wins and losses and competition, but about fair-mindedness. That when Black lives matter, all lives will matter. It's about the vision of hope and then joining to do the work to become an anti-racist and just society, to have your voices heard. As Dr. King shared, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. It's about the possibility of acknowledging truths and choosing the resulting light, as that amazing Amanda Gorman, the young poet that spoke at the Biden-Harris inauguration said, "There is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it." I pray through God's grace for possibilities not deferred, but realized. Thank you very much.